So we're still in that first leg of the journey from prayer to understanding the author's point, right? So we just started. You kind of get into the weeds by making observations, asking questions, right? But even if you notice, at kind of the end of our time, I tried to have us kind of step back a bit and zoom out and say, what seems to be the most important things we've noticed? And it's important to have both of those elements to studying Scripture, kind of zooming in, getting into the weeds and the details. But you can sometimes get lost there and miss what's going on. You can miss kind of the forest for the trees. And so this next principle, structure and main point, is really helpful for doing the kind of stepping back kind of view. So the image for this is a bridge, all right? And the idea here is a bridge serves a purpose, right? It's meant to get you from one point to another over water, all right? So that's its goal. And to accomplish that goal, a bridge was built with different parts, and all the parts fit together to accomplish that purpose. And that's the same way that authors write. As God inspired his authors to write, they wrote with intentionality. They wrote and structured, they put together their writings in such a way to help you see their main point so you can get to transformation. All right? So they didn't just throw stuff on the page and kind of hoped it stuck. They put it together intentionally. And they want you to see how they put it together intentionally so that you can see the most important things and see the main thing to get to the transformational intent, all right? And so the question, though, we might have is, well, how do I learn to see the structure of a passage? How do I learn to step back a bit and see how it kind of fits together? Well, there's a couple of different things we can do, and every genre here is a little bit different, okay? But with narrative, one tool is by paying attention to plot, okay? And so this is probably a drawing you saw from your English class back in the day, right? This idea of the plot climax tool. The idea is you have an initial setting, right? So the story starts, you get introduced to maybe the characters, the place, but nothing's really happening. It's just the setup. Then right here, the action takes off. Something bad happens, action starts to happen, and the tension builds. More and more action happens until you get the climax, which is where all the action comes to a head and gets addressed. And then you'll often have in the story some resolving action, like here's what happened after the problem got fixed. And then you end up at like a new setting. What's helpful here is that the main point of a passage is always found in the climax. All right? So now, not every story uses this, but most do. So I find when I'm first studying a narrative, this is the first kind of tool I pull out of my toolkit to try to identify the structure. I try to ask, does this seem to follow this pattern of like an initial setting, some building action, a climax, some kind of resolving action, right? Now, sometimes in a story, you can have things like this where it's like, you can have a mini climax and then like another climax, okay? You could have like two climaxes in a story, say, right? But the point is the author's kind of using tension building in a narrative to get you to see the main point, okay? So you can kind of divide up your passage. You can, after you've looked at it in details, you can step back and say, okay, how would I summarize what the initial setting is? How would I summarize the rising action? What verse numbers go with that, and how would I summarize it? How would I summarize the climax and then the new situation? And then you can put that together and say, okay, here's my main point then. It allows you to step back and get some clarity on what's going on, all right? Now, another way that narratives sometimes structure themselves is through character dialogue, all right? So here's where it's more this back and forth dialogue in the story that drives the structure or the flow of the story, okay? So for example, Genesis 15, you can turn there for a minute and I'll just kind of show you this. You have this conversation between Abraham and God in Genesis 15. God comes to him in verse 1 and gives him a word. Verse 2, Abram raises a question. Then verse 3, God kind of responds with like another word. And then verse 6, Abraham has a response. So you have this pattern. God speaks, Abraham's like, I'm not sure about that. God speaks to him again, Abraham acts. Then the pattern repeats again. Verse 7, God gives him another word. And then again, Abraham goes, yeah, I'm not sure about that in verse 8. And then God gives him another word, a promise, to assuage that doubt, and then Abraham acts. It's this kind of pattern that helps you see the story, right? And so by paying attention to that, you can kind of see, okay, this whole story is driven by God is giving Abraham these promises. And there's two promises, descendants and land, right? And the actions at the end show how these promises are going to be received. Abraham believes God, and in the second half, God himself walks through the cut-in-half animals on Abraham's behalf. Basically saying, Abraham, if you can't keep your side of the bargain, I'll keep it for you. That's how the promises are going to be fulfilled, by Abraham believing and by God holding up both ends of the promise. So the structure kind of helps you see that. But there's a lot of stories where it's more dialogue-driven. Maybe that's what's kind of going on, right? Sometimes it might be more setting, right? That a passage is broken up by the story takes place here, then it shifts to a different scene, then it shifts to a different scene, and that helps you kind of divide the passage and see the chunks and then ask, how do they connect? That's really what structure is about, is seeing, can I divide up this passage into chunks and then ask how it all connects to get to the main point, right? Because sometimes it's setting. Sometimes it's maybe a mixture of these things, or maybe it's just like you're looking for transition words, right? But what I want to stress here is there's not like a nice, neat formula for how to do this. This isn't doing math, right? We're reading narratives, and authors can be creative in how they kind of tell their stories and move things along. But here's the point. God is the capital A author, and as he inspired the lowercase a authors, wants you to be able to follow the story. He's not trying to make it difficult for you to understand, right? Like it's not difficult to understand in Genesis 1 that God is the creator of everything, that he made it all good, he created by his word, and humans are the pinnacle, right? That wasn't hard to see, right? There might be some details that are tough for us to figure out, but he wants us to see the main things. He's not trying to play hide and seek with us, right? We can have that confidence. So what we're trying to do is, as we got into the weeds and we notice things, we'll start to notice some of these clues, you know? Is there lots of dialogue going on? Is there lots of scene changes? Is there lots of tension building? And then we're able to step back and try to break it up into chunks, okay? So what you can do then is once you've got those chunks broken up, you can try to write out in one sentence what the whole passage is about. Now, that's a hard thing to do, actually, surprisingly. But it's really helpful because it helps you focus and say, have I really grasped what the main thing's about? It's a really helpful exercise, right? So let's try to do this together for Genesis 1, all right? We'll do it kind of together as a group exercise. Then I'll break you up to look at Genesis chapter 2, and you're going to try to do it for Genesis chapter 2, all right? So, all right. So Genesis 1. Where do you think kind of the first little section of Genesis chapter 1 ends? And why? Sorry, what? God rested. Yeah, so that's kind of the whole passage. But now if we're going to take that passage and break it up into little chunks, where would our first little chunk kind of end? And why? What?
Verse 8.
Verse 8?
Verse 8.
Verse?
The first day.
Oh, the first day. Okay, yep. So we could do 1:1 to 1:2 is before the first day, and then we could start a next section at the first day. Yep. And then from there we could break it up by days, right? So we could say 1:3 to does someone just want to call out the numbers, kind of where this goes?
3 through 5.
3 through 5. Okay, day 1. Yep.
6 through 8.
Okay, day 2. 9 to
9 through 13.
day 3, okay. 14 to
19.
day 4, okay.
20 through 23.
Day 5. All right.
4.
Probably all the way to the end of the chapter then, right? 31. Day 6. All right. And then 2, 1 to 3 is day 7.
Yes.
All right. Now, just looking at this, which day is the most important day just by how many verses it gets assigned? Day 6. So even just noticing this structure, right? So like, I'll just call this setup. Even just by noticing this structure, we've already noticed that day 6 is the most important day. It's got the most verses, right? Now, another thing we could look at for structure is you could break it up this way. So you have Genesis 1 to 2 is earth is formless and void. Okay? And days 1 to 3 is form. And days 4 through 6 addresses void. And day 7 is job well done. All right? So, day 1, he gives the form of night and day. Day 4, he fills that form. So there's not a void anymore. He fills it with sun, moon, stars. Day 2 is the form of sky and water. Day 5, he fills that form with birds and sea creatures. Day 3 is the form of land separated from water. Day 6 is the creation of all the land animals. He fills it. So you have this kind of pattern, right, of where God is forming the world and then filling it with everything good. And there's this nice balance and echo. So even the kind of structure shows the balance and order and goodness of God, right? So, right? And we're noticing, okay, day 6, though, is clearly the pinnacle of creation, right? And then day 7, he rests, not because he's tired. We didn't talk about this last time, but I guess not tired. He's resting because there's nothing more to do. It's all done. It's all done. It's all good. It's perfect. So you can rest, right? It's not communicating tiredness. It's communicating completeness. There's nothing left undone that needs to be done, right? So here's our nice structure. So how would we try to summarize, thinking about the key observations we saw, right? And this structure, right? So God's creating, he's ordering, it's good. How would we try to put this together in a sentence to try to sum up the main point of the passage? Here's what I recommend doing. Instead of trying to just write out a sentence, which feels hard, let's just jot down a couple of the key ideas we know we want to have in the sentence, okay? And then we can try to build a sentence. So I'm guessing we're going to want God creates, right? What are the key ideas that are going to have to be in this main point?
My eyes is not.
I know the green is not very good, is it?
Probably help to
Yeah.
see from the distance. And here, it's washable.
It's washable.
So
Okay,
you
let me
can-
take a look.
Yeah, so thank you for your consideration.
Yeah, I know.
You got black here too.
Yeah, that black one was dying though.
Yeah. Yeah, my eyes is like, I need to see, but not clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's washable. I tested out.
Okay. Washable. Perfect. All right. So God creates. What else are going to be our main ideas? Good. All right. Is that any better? No, it's too thin.
It's probably a cleanliness board or something.
All right. Since it doesn't erase very well, I'm going to go back to the green. Sorry. Until we find something better. All right. So good. God creates. It's good. What else do we want to have in there?
Purposeful or intentional.
Yep. Purposeful, order, something along those lines, right? Yep.
Everything
Everything's connected? Okay, yep. So connection, relationship. We talked to you about how God creates by his word and spirit, right? So we probably should have that in there. And then we probably should have something about the importance of day 6 in here, right? So I'll just jot down like humans as images / pinnacle. All right. So again, we're seeing that God's the creator. Even the structure shows us it's ordered. The repetition shows it's good, right? We've seen in the repetition it's by his word and spirit, the let us. We see the pinnacle of human. So let's try to put this together now in a sentence. And don't worry about having a perfect sentence. The best thing is just throw something on the whiteboard or on your page, and then you can always edit it afterwards. So anyone want to take a stab at getting us started?
May I try something?
Yes.
God creates because God loves.
All right. God creates because God loves. All right. All right. That's a good start. All right. So what do we want to fill this in a little bit? So that's a good start. So do we want to say anything about how he creates or what he creates?
We say God created by word and spirit.
Yep.
I think we have to mention what was it at the beginning. Was it? It has to be something that God decided to change.
Yep.
He had a purpose.
It was chaos. It was.
That's right. It was nothingness. Yep.
nothingness, no meaningful in any way.
Yep.
No idea of a creator and all that.
Right. So there's no idea of creator.
Some background of the reason why God decided
Yeah. Okay.
to have to make some change.
Yeah, because obviously, like, God didn't have to create, and so maybe we want something in here about, the purpose of creation, right? So we kind of have this here because he loves, but maybe we could flesh this out. But also, I wonder, like, God created by his word and spirit. What did he create? Maybe let's fill this in first. How would we sum up what he created?
Create the universe.
Yep.
I would go with environment for man to glorify God or to exercise dominion.
Okay. So God created by his word and spirit. I'm going to put in the word good. I just think we need to have the word good in here. A good, and I'll maybe even put ordered. A good and ordered world where man could,
Should we use the word humans instead of man?
yes. Thank you. Because you're right. It says the ESV says man, but you're right. Back when they first translated it, I think everyone knew man meant human, but today it sounds male. So you're right. Created a world where humans could what? Could flourish,
Where
multiply.
he was created in his image.
Yep. Okay. So how about could be his images? I'm trying to look for words here. I don't want to put words in your guys' mouth.
Over creation on the earth.
What?
Over creation on the earth.
All right. Could be his images ruling over creation Do we want to say anything about this idea of love or relationship? Do we want to maybe kind of put that back in here in the sentence? You guys think it's important enough to end up there?
It's important because the word love is not, I don't think it exists in any other religion. There's no concept of love. So we need to put it something.
Yeah, we need to put some type of relational, right, emphasis here, right? Yeah, so how about creation in relationship to God? All right, so here we go. Here's our statement. God created, by his word and spirit, a good and ordered world where humans could be his images, ruling over creation in relationship to God. Does that sound like a good summary of the main point of the passage? Yeah.
Yeah, it's good, but I think even though we don't see the word love in chapter 1,
Yep.
but I think it's something that differentiates the God we believe versus any other deities out there.
Yeah, it's true. The God we worship is known as a God of love, absolutely. I would lean towards leaving the word love out just because it's not in the passage. But you're right. It's true about God. Absolutely. And we're going to see that as we go through Genesis, right? He is a God of love and mercy. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
to contrast the God of the Bible with other deities, says you've got to go outside the Bible to even define what or understand what these other deities might be.
Right. So yeah, that's the Bible.
So it's
Yeah.
not contained really within the chapter itself.
Right. Yep. Yep. Yeah. And we want to try to stick to within the chapter first, right? And then when we talk about connecting to Christ, we can see how do we understand this in light of Jesus, right? And then we can add that layer. But right now we're just kind of doing this layer. So I hope you can kind of see the process we've done. What we've done is we read and made lots of observations and questions. Using that data, we kind of stepped back and tried to identify the structure so we could see maybe the main kind of themes of emphasis. We then jotted down a couple of phrases to help us see that. And then we put it together in a sentence. So now, if someone asks you, what's Genesis 1 about? You can be like, oh, it's about God creating a good and ordered world by his word and spirit in which we as humans could be his image bearers and rule over creation in relationship to him. That's what it's about, right? And so now, and then you can say, now let me walk you through Genesis 1. It starts with God, and he creates everything. And he does it by his word and the spirit. And look at what he created. It's a good and a perfect world. And look at the pinnacle of us, it's humans, right? And so you can kind of walk people through it because you got clarity in what the main thing is. Yep.
Can you break that nice long sentence into three short sentences?
Yeah, I mean, you could. Yep. Do you want me to try to do that right now, you're saying? Oh,
Right now. Three short, very short.
gosh, I'm always terrible at this. I always need to get some thought. This is where I'd think about it. All right. So, all right. God created a good and perfect world by his word and spirit. God created a good and perfect world by his spirit, by his word and spirit. Humans are made as his images to rule over creation in relationship to God. 2 sentences. Humans are created as his images to rule over creation in relationship to God. Now, we could tweak it. If you wanted to be a really polished speaker, you could tweak it. But again, the point isn't to be this perfect polished speaker. The point is to get clarity on what God's word is about, right? Because sometimes when we make lots of observations, we get lost in the weeds. And doing this process of stepping back helps us focus in on what the main thing is. And it gets us to some of the applications we were talking about earlier, right, Sue? Where it's if I really believe this, then man, I'm going to focus on how am I engaging in my work and creation. Oh, I'm going to focus on relationship, right, with others and with God, right? And that comes right out of this main point here, right? All right, so now here's what I want you to do. I want you to, at your tables, read Genesis chapter 2, verses 4 to 25. We're going to read the rest of chapter 2. And I want you to try to identify the structure. Break it down into chunks, okay? For each little chunk, try to write a quick summary phrase of what's going on in that chunk, which is a quick, helpful reminder for you. And then at the end, try to write out one sentence about what the main point of the passage is. All right? So I'm going to give you guys about 17 minutes here to work on that. Okay? I know you're going to say, oh, this isn't a lot of time. I agree, it's not a lot of time. There's two reasons for that. One, we only have so much time in the day. But two, I want you to see that even in your morning devotions, even if you don't have an hour, you can actually see a lot if you're intentional to use the time well by God's help. All right? So you're going to make observations and notice things, but try to kind of really zero in on this idea of using the principle of structure. Okay? So try to identify the chunks, summarize what each chunk's about, and write out a main sentence. Okay? So first, kind of read the passage, pray together, and then dive in, okay? And there should be some instructions in kind of your workbook if you want to remember kind of what they are, okay? It's like a practice page.